And I call the member for Canberra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member for creating this opportunity to talk about the arts, as I am always really proud to talk about the arts in this place, and particularly the vibrant and active arts community in the ACT, who I've been proud to advocate for throughout the pandemic. The arts were so critical. Well, the arts are so central, actually, to all aspects of Australian life. They tell our stories, they inspire us, and the pandemic really brought this to the fore, as it was to the arts that we looked for comfort and entertainment, but it was also the arts that suffered the most as people were unable to gather together at live performances, in galleries, and the jobs in those sectors were obviously some of the first to be hit and the worst hit by the economic impacts of the pandemic. So it was throughout that time that myself and others in the then opposition were very proud to stand up and fight for the arts in this place, as they were neglected by the previous government throughout that. For the first 100 days of the pandemic, nothing was said by the previous coalition government about the arts. They were largely left out of the JobKeeper scheme due to the nature of their employment, and there was no specific support for them for a very long time throughout that time. It was as if the arts were not seen as real workers, as if people, creatives and people in creative industries, their jobs were not equal to other jobs. And we also saw that in the university sector, and we saw that with casuals, and I could go on. But I will focus today on the arts sector. So the then Liberal National Government really were dragged kicking and screaming to support the arts sector during the pandemic at all, while artists desperately needed our help. And I also want to note that it's the arts community who are often the first to step up and support the broader community when disaster hits, and the bushfires were a perfect example of that, where they made donations and ran performances that were to raise money for affected communities. But when they were hit, their government was missing in action. The then Minister Paul Fletcher misled people about how much support was going to the arts sector during the COVID pandemic. He claimed that up to $10 billion in support was going to arts sector workers through the JobKeeper scheme, but included in that were non-arts sector workers like clothing and footwear wholesaling and retailing, clothing manufacturing, jewellery wholesaling and retailing sectors, so not really arts at all. The belated response in establishing the RISE Fund had no vision and no strategy. And the Liberals and Nationals came under fire, as we know, for granting $1.35 million to a Guns N' Roses tour, while our Australian performers and artists were really struggling, and the neediest parts of the sector were left with nothing. And this was heavily criticised by Australian artists and by Labor. Australia has had two landmark cultural policies, and those were both delivered by Labor. The first, Creative Nation under Paul Keating, and Creative Australia under Simon Crean. And we will honour that legacy by delivering a national cultural policy. The Liberals, in fact, scrapped the last national cultural policy in 2013, and they replaced it with nothing. So we are very proud now in government, again, in the first 6 months, to have this well underway, and will be announced by the end of the year. And Minister Tony Burke has been travelling the country, talking with artists and creatives and the sector around the development of that policy, and I was really pleased to attend his town hall in Canberra with our arts community, notably at the Gorman House Arts Centre, which Labor is also going to be contributing, federal Labor contributing $5 million to its really much needed renovations. We are working hard on our commitment to launch the National Cultural Policy and change the trajectory of the sector after this decade of neglect. This will put arts back at the centre of all aspects of life and policy where it belongs in Australia, and I am very proud to be part of a government that is going to stand up for our arts sector, the jobs involved and the intrinsic importance of arts to Australian life. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.